Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and I'm recording on a grey and rainy, pretty miserable May the 4th here in Reykjavik, Iceland. It's been a bit of a miserable week. I've been under the weather and spent much of the week curled up on the sofa under a blanket, and during that time I decided to revisit a game that I reviewed once before on this show and that I mentioned last week. It's a timely game, with it being May the 4th. It is Jedi Fallen Order. This is a game that I reviewed in episode 10, one of the first episodes of this podcast. It was packed into a roundup with Death Stranding, which had just come out at the time, and a couple of other games, and it was just some 10-minute impressions on that game. It was a pretty glowing little segment. But I've finished that game now. It's been helping me get through a bit of a rough little fevery flu that I've had, and I actually managed to get to the end of it this time. I thought that I would give it another go because I catch hype pretty easily, as I've mentioned before, and the hype game of the moment is definitely Star Wars Jedi Survivor. But when it comes to Survivor, it's a full-price game, and I was thinking, should I really buy that? Can I justify buying that? I didn't even get through Fallen Order. In fact, it kind of annoyed me despite the fact that I liked it a lot as well. So I decided to replay it, and I got to the end this time. I've gotten all the way through it over the last week or so, and so I've decided to give it a full review, seeing as Survivor is out. I will say that this time I saw credits, and it was enough to make me buy Jedi Survivor, so I've had enough of a good time with it to spur me on to play the sequel. I have played the first chapter of the sequel. It's brilliant, actually. It looks fantastic. It plays brilliantly. So I'll be talking about Jedi Survivor in the future. But the featured game of this episode will be Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. But before we get to Fallen Order, I've got a few items to start off the podcast with. The first of which is a look at the games that are coming out this May. It's the first podcast of May. And so over on the show's Discord, we've been keeping a spreadsheet of the games that we are all excited about that are coming out each month. And so at the start of the month, I like to have a little run through what's coming out. A couple of them are out already. On May the 2nd, the first big release of this month, and a pretty big one generally, was Redfall. You may have seen some of the discourse about Redfall. It is a multiplayer vampire gothic shooter, first-person shooter by Arcane, published by Xbox, a Game Pass exclusive. No, it's actually on PC as well, so it's an Xbox console exclusive, also on PC, and it has been a little bit of a controversial game. The reviews have been terrible for this one. I think a lot of people were excited about it because of the history of Arcane with Dishonored and Prey, and more recently Deathloop. This seems to be the worst game that studio has made. It's pretty broken from what I've seen. I've watched a little bit of video of it. The enemy AI is pretty poor, and it seems to be pretty bug-ridden and a little basic and glitchy. So I think I'm going to skip playing Redfall. I will keep an eye on it and see if it shapes up over time. I feel pretty bad for the Arcane guys. It was made by Arcane Austin, and I understand that most of the Arcane bangers came out of Arcane Lyon. So maybe it's something to do with that, although there are rumours swirling around about why Redfall launched in the state that it did. On the 4th, though, Ravenlok came out. This is today. It is by Koro Cucumber, a developer I haven't heard of before, and they say it's an action-packed fairy tale reimagining of a troubled kingdom and a young girl's destiny to fulfill a dangerous prophecy, and it is by the creators of Echo Generation. That one is on Game Pass too. I am downloading it as we speak, and I will definitely give it a try. It looks pretty interesting. On the 8th, coming up, is one that some of our Discord people are super excited about. Shout out to Dave. Darkest Dungeon 2 by Red Hook Studio. The gothic, turn-based, roguelike party battler. I've played a little bit of Darkest Dungeon 1. It's a pretty interesting game. You have to form a party of different characters and take them into dungeons where you will do turn-based battles and try and get to the end. But as you do that, they will suffer mentally. They get fatigued, they get terrified, they get panicked. You have to put them into rehab before you can take them out again in the tavern, and you get to build up a central village where you can rehabilitate your poor characters that have been traumatized by all the cosmic horror of the Darkest Dungeon. So number 2 is coming out soon. Looks like it's got some 3D graphics this time, with a carriage trundling through a kind of a dark Transylvanian landscape. So I'll be interested to try that one. I've requested a code for it, and hopefully I'll get to review that one in the future. On the 12th, it's the biggest game of the year, biggest game of the decade, dare I say. It's Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. This is a game that I think everyone is very excited about. Various people in our Discord are talking about buying Switches. I think 2 people have bought new Switches specifically just to play Zelda. I'm absolutely stoked about it. It is, of course, the Breath of the Wild follow-up. I've watched a few trailers for it. I've talked about it on this podcast. I'm very excited about that one. I'm very excited about the direction that Nintendo are taking with it. It looks like a really interesting, creative world with aerial sky islands. You can dive down to ground level. You can go underground. You can create contraptions. There are new enemies to fight, really interesting looking ones. And there's some interesting seeming lore swirling around this one to do with Link and where it is in the Zelda timeline and all that kind of thing. I think I'm going to have some guests on to talk about that one. I do know one person who is playing a review copy now and says that we all have a lot to look forward to. So the early signs are amazing for Tears of the Kingdom on the 12th. On the 16th, Humanity is coming out. We saw a trailer for this one recently. It's a Lemmingsy looking game where you have this trail of human beings walking in a queue, just hundreds of them, just spewing out of a portal. You have to create a route for them through a 3-dimensional landscape. They can swim through water, they can bounce over gaps and that kind of thing. Very, very visually striking. I haven't really enjoyed a Lemmings-like game where you have to get a huge train of people from one place to the other over obstacles for quite a while. But this is the second one that came out recently. Tin Hearts is another one that is also coming out on the 16th on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. It's already out on Switch. I do have a review code for that one. It's a very different looking one. You get some cute little soldiers that you have to guide through a giant house in the Tinykin style or the Honey I Shrunk the Kids style. So Humanity looks pretty interesting too. And Tin Hearts. So we've got 2 of those types of games coming out. We just got a release date for Planet of Lana, the 2D hand-drawn Studio Ghibli-looking platformer with a little bit of inside in it as well. Very different visual style, but a similar-looking gameplay style with some stealth and platforming and puzzles. So Planet of Lana is finally coming out on the 23rd. Also out on the 23rd, an interesting-looking game called After Us by Piccolo, published by Private Division. This is a dreamy-looking puzzle platformer with some Solar Ash vibes to it, quite fluid-looking traversal, where you have to move through a void as Gaia, the spirit of life, and you have to bring back extinct animals and salvage the souls of the extinct animal kingdom. Looks kind of interesting. Check out a trailer for that one. Check out a trailer for After Us. It's been sailing under the radar, but it looks pretty interesting to me. Also on the 23rd, the Miasma Chronicles by The Bearded Ladies, published by 505. This is a tactical turn-based RPG. It looks a little bit like something like Wasteland, like top-down tactics with a party, but the graphics are beautiful on Miasma Chronicles. It had been sailing under the radar as well, I think, but it has a very striking visual style, and it does feel like tactical turn-based games are making a bit of a comeback recently. There's been quite a few around, and Miasma Chronicles is one of the more interesting ones, I think. That's out on the 23rd. There are 2 games coming out on the 25th that I have on my list here. The first one is the somewhat ill-fated seeming Gollum game, Lord of the Rings Gollum. This has been troubled, I would say. It looks a little ropey, to be honest, and it's been through various delays. Seems to be a bit of a development hell title. Of all of the characters that you could pick to make a Lord of the Rings game about, of all of the characters in the Fellowship of the Ring and the things that they did with Shadow of Mordor, Gollum is an oddball choice, so I guess it's going to be a stealth game. It's going to explore some of Gollum's lore. I don't have high hopes for that one, but that's out on the 25th. Also, Cassette Beasts comes out that day by Bitten Studio, published by the usually reliable Raw Fury. That's coming to Xbox, Switch, and Game Pass, and it's a pixel art creature collecting RPG with strong Pokemon vibes. So if you're an old school Pokemon fan, you might want to keep an eye on Cassette Beasts. And to round things out for May, there are 2 indie games coming out on the 31st. One of them is Venba. This is a really interesting looking cartoony cooking game, a narrative puzzle cooking game set within an Indian family who have emigrated to Canada. You have to cook up dishes, you have to combine ingredients, you have to cook as a puzzle and restore lost recipes. You get to talk to the various family members and explore the story of family, love, loss and more, say the developers, Vizai Games. It's coming out on Switch, it's going to be on Game Pass. Venba is very much on my list. And the final game that we have here is by Umanimations Games and published by Focus Entertainment, and it is Dordogne, the watercoloured, pretty-looking indie game where you play as Mimi and you are a child and you have to go around recollecting memories that you have lost of times that you shared with your late grandmother. It says here, explore Dordogne landscapes with sumptuous hand-painted watercolour environments. And if you've seen any footage of Dordogne, then you will know this is a really beautiful looking game. So loads of good games to look forward to in May. I've got a couple of them bolded here. I will definitely be playing a little bit of Ravenlok. I'll be playing Tears of the Kingdom, of course. I'll be playing a little bit of Planet of Lana. I did play the demo, but I'm keen to try the full thing, and I'll definitely be playing Venba. Dordogne also on my list as well. So packed month in May, really packed. And before we get into Fallen Order, there are a couple of new games that I tried out this week as well that I'm going to run through. I don't think I will be doing full reviews of either of these, but I know that some people were looking forward to them. They both had great trailers. They both have really good visual styles. One of them is on Game Pass. It is called The Last Case of Benedict Fox. I tried out this one. I played about an hour of it, and I bounced on it pretty hard, I'm sad to say. It's a Lovecraft-inspired Metroidvania, 2D, with a really nice 2.5D visual style. It's a story about cults and demons and forbidden knowledge, and it's a family mystery. And as Benedict Fox, you are investigating forbidden secrets, and you're trying to find out what went down with your father. And this one, sadly, despite the fact that it has a wonderful art style, it ran incredibly badly on my Series S. If you think about games like the Ori games that have 2.5D and similar kind of purple, midnight blue, vivid colour schemes, Ori ran amazingly well even on the Switch. It was very, very slick and buttery smooth. This one was really struggling on the Series S. It was juddering. It was sub 30 FPS, and I keep saying this, but I keep saying that I'm not a frame rate guy, but I think that is becoming less and less the case. I found this to be very distracting. I think that as we all get used to playing games at 60 FPS, 30 as a minimum, when we see games that drop below that, it kind of hurts the eyes. And I found myself struggling a little bit with it. It's a game that does require timing. It has a deflection and parrying combat system. And the low frame rate was, it's not that it stopped my reaction times from being able to play the game or anything like that. It was just that I was constantly being visually distracted by the frame drops and juddering to the point at which I was just, my mind wasn't fully in the combat. And the exploration was less fun because I was noticing that the system was struggling to keep up with the game. So I'm not sure that reaction times are really affected by 30 or 60 FPS unless you're playing on a mouse and playing an FPS game where you have to whip the mouse around constantly. But just as a purely distracting factor that takes the edge off your enjoyment, Benedict Fox really, really struggles. As well as that, Benedict is a supernatural, curious cultist in this game with a kind of demonic co-pilot who will come out of him like a purple mist with an evil face on it and speak to him. And the start of the game is a little unwelcoming in several ways. Like, the tutorials were cursory, and straight away you come up against lots of locks, lots of locked doors, lots of combination safes, lots of things that you cannot yet do. And that's fairly standard Metroidvania fare, but I felt like in this game, you weren't given any easy wins to kind of get you into the game, to get you into the flow of the game, to make you feel like you were progressing. It's rather that you started with 10 doors that you could not open, a safe you cannot open, something you cannot decode, a desk drawer that you cannot open, a key rack with one key on it that needs more keys on the rack. And it just felt like everywhere I went in this game, there was a door being slammed in my face, which was a little off-putting. I felt like the game did a very bad job of welcoming me in as a new player, helping me get my feet on the ground. It was hostile, and the map was confusing. The areas didn't seem to track together very well. They were all similarly named, so even though there is fast travel and I uncovered 4 fast travel points, I couldn't tell you which one was which. So even if I did fast travel, it was like a shot in the dark going to a place that I barely remembered. So it's a thumbs down from me for the last case of Benedict Fox. I may try it again. I will wait and see if it gets patched, because I can see that there is something here. It's visually ambitious and it's an interesting world, but when there are so many games to play, you got 10, 15 games that you're waiting to play, waiting to try. When you try one and it lets you down both technically and in terms of tutorialization and welcoming you in, it is enough for me to cool off pretty fast on a game. And that's what happened here. The same can be said for the game Strayed Lights. I've talked about this one before. It's another beautiful looking game, very intriguing design. It has the similar color palette actually. It's very dark, very glossy, very purple, midnight, neon, dream space kind of look to it, which I really, really like. But I knew pretty much straight off the bat that this was not the game for me. I actually didn't get through the tutorial of this game. I think I played 20 minutes or half an hour of it, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to play this game. And that is because it's a game that focuses entirely on parrying as the core mechanic of the game. I'm going to be talking about parrying a little bit during this podcast because of Jedi Fallen Order. It's pretty central to that game too. But Strayed Lights comes in sharp contrast to Fallen Order. I think in Fallen Order, the enemies have tells that you can see coming, and you have what feels like an attainable window to get your block in. Like the Imperial Scouts will take a big backswing before they come at you. Some of the enemies are a little faster, and you have to start to recognize their combos and stuff, but it felt manageable. I always felt like I was in with a chance. And in the tutorial of Strayed Lights, I really did not feel like I was in with a chance, partially because the parry window is incredibly low. I guess you could say it is Sekiro-like in that way, but also because you have to match colors. So if an enemy is purple and they take a swing at you, there is a parry button for purple. If they are green or blue, there are buttons for that as well. So not only are you parrying, but you're trying to read color-matched attacks. And I just struggled so hard with it. And even by the end of the tutorial, I thought, not only can I not see these attacks coming, and this is the tutorial, it didn't ease me in at all, but I have to color match as well, and parrying isn't my favorite mechanic in games, I'll be honest about that. So Strayed Lights was a bit of a no for me. I couldn't barely parry anything. The timing didn't feel natural or right for me. But if you are a Sekiro fan who likes that gothic midnight inky purple color scheme, and you love parrying, and parrying is your favorite thing, I would say Strayed Lights might be a game for you. Sadly, it was not a game for me. So those are the 2 games that I tried this week that did not make the cut. That was the case of Benedict Fox and Strayed Lights. And just before we get into Fallen Order, let me mention this is a patron-supported podcast. We have a really thriving, busy, cheerful Discord community of patrons. If you would like to come and join us and talk about games, tell us what you're playing, share screenshots, share Wordle scores, share recommendations for this podcast, and get access to 10 different bonus episodes, you can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. I currently have 42 patrons. I'm aiming to get to 50. When we get to 50, we'll do something special. I don't know quite what that will be yet. Maybe a stream, maybe a special episode, maybe a Q&A or an off-topic bonus episode, some kind of community event or piece of bonus content. If you would like to contribute to that, contribute to this show, help me buy new equipment, help me buy the music that I use on the podcast, upkeep the domain name and all of the associated costs of the podcast, and join our community, it's patreon.com/gaminginthewild, and I will put a link to that in the show notes. Big thank you to all of my existing patrons, and thank you very much to you if you're a regular listener or a new listener who thinks that you might take the plunge. And with all of that said, let's move on and talk about this timely May the 4th featured game, Jedi Fallen Order. So Jedi Fallen Order came out in 2019. It was developed by Respawn, who made Apex Legends and Titanfall 1 and 2. It was published by EA, and it came out on PlayStation 4, Xbox, and PC. A next-gen version was released in 2021 for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I played it on PS5 and it ran really, really well, as it should, I guess, being a last-gen upgrade, but it ran a silky smooth 60 FPS. The resolution was good, it looked great, and it ran well. The music in this one is by Gordy Harb and Stephen Barton. We're listening to some of it now. It is a very faithful Star Wars soundtrack with that John Williams feel to it, and it adds a huge amount to the game, I would say, to the game's Star Wars-y atmosphere. The game was medium well received when it came out. It has a Metacritic score of 79 for last gen. A few places did review the next gen version, or the current gen version rather. It has two 90s and an 80, so this version has 85, so it's gone up by 6% based on the next gen upgrade. How Long to Beat has it at 17 hours. It took me around 20. And the developers described this one as a galaxy-spanning adventure in which an abandoned Padawan must complete his training, develop new powerful Force abilities, and master the art of the lightsaber, all whilst staying one step ahead of the Empire. And I have to say about this one that it's a nostalgic Star Wars adventure that nails the elusive vibe that made the first trilogy great. There are some significant bumps in the road, but it's an accomplished game that really does make you feel the Force as a Padawan runaway, relearning your Jedi skills. So I was reading a little bit around this game, and there is some quite interesting stuff out there about it from Respawn, who said that they worked alongside Lucasfilm to try and get all of the details right in this game, because it is canon, it is Star Wars canon, which means that it has to fit in with a quite large universe at this point, with characters that all have timelines from trilogy to trilogy to trilogy. So they had to really work on making this story hang together with the larger Star Wars mythology. So this one is set between the first and second trilogies. So at the end of the first trilogy, spoilers for Star Wars by the way, at the end of the first trilogy, the Jedi Order is wiped out, all but wiped out, and the Empire rises, Darth Vader rises, the Emperor rises, and we are set up for the original Star Wars trilogy with Luke and Ben and all of those people. And this one happens between the two. So this is a period when the Jedi Order has been decimated, when the Empire is rising and they are purging Jedis and trying to track down and kill anyone and everyone who is Force sensitive. All of the Jedi Masters have been taken down and so forth. And so there are just a few stragglers in the universe, and the word is in this universe that the Jedis are gone and that the Empire is here to stay. You play as Cal Kestis, who is a Jedi Padawan who is hiding out on a scrapyard planet. This game has an absolutely thrilling introduction. As Cal Kestis, you are in a burned landscape with loads of crashed spaceships and star destroyers, and you are carving them apart like hard space shipbreaker style, but on dry land. It's a really cloudy, dark, stormy planet, and it seems that these people have a pretty miserable existence, and that's where we find Cal. He is hiding the fact that he is a Jedi Padawan. He conceals his identity from everyone around him, but the Empire track him down. He is forced to use the Force, and the Empire get a scent of him, and they come after him. He is hunted down by an Inquisitor called the Second Sister, who is going to be our nemesis in this game. You have a bit of a battle. You have to escape from the Second Sister. It's really cool, kinetic sequence where you're on a train and you're falling, you're using the Force, you're fighting stormtroopers, you get your lightsaber out and you start to learn some of the basics. But when it comes to a head, Cal is rescued by two people called Ser Junda and Grease Doritus, who are going to be your companions throughout the game. They are two rebels flying a very, very cool ship called the Mantis. They manage to extract Cal and tell him that the Empire is seeking something called the Holocron, and they have come to recruit him. The Holocron is a list of Force-sensitive children that is sealed in a vault. The Empire is trying to find it so they can wipe out all of the Force-sensitive kids and end the Jedi Order for good. And in service of this quest, you go to a planet called Bogano. This is the first level of the game. It's an all but uncharted planet. You get access to one small corner of it. And this is an interesting place. It has a very, very strong Star Wars vibe. It's a little bit like the original Star Wars, the encampment where Luke lives with his uncle and aunt, and where Ben lives and all of those little round houses and stuff. Bogano is a little bit like that, but it's a swampy planet. It's the site of a temple, and the home of a long-gone Jedi called Eno Cordova. It has those really strong Tatooine vibes. All of the design is just beautiful. It's very, very cool. It's one of the best levels in the game, actually, partially because it is so small and compact and contained. And Eno Cordova is long gone, but he left a droid called BD-1. And this mirrors the story of Star Wars, in which R2-D2 has the all-important Death Star plans in his circuitry, in his memory. BD-1 has some hologram messages from Eno Cordova that have been encoded, but BD-1 decides to show them to Cal. He can clearly feel the Force in Cal, and so Cal ends up adopting the little droid, and they go on a quest to help BD-1 unveil his memories, to unravel the holograms from Eno Cordova, and to discover the key that will let them open the temple, get the holocron, and stop the Empire from getting their mitts on those kids and wiping them out. So there you go. You have your little droid friend, you have your quest, you have a ship, you have a couple of friends, and out you go into a series of really interesting planets to try and find the holocron and save the Jedi Order. And I have to say, I think that the planets that you explore in this game are really one of the stars of the show. It really does have a very strong Star Wars atmosphere throughout all of the locations that you go to that really helps to carry the game. And as you can hear from the music, it is very loyal to the original score of the films. And all of the landscapes and the things that you will encounter on your way are also very true to the original feel of Star Wars in a way that not much has been for quite a long time. So I was quite smitten with this. I'm an original generation Star Wars fan. I remember watching them as kids, and I just absolutely love it. There's something about the nostalgia of the original Star Wars material that I associate with childhood very strongly. And I think a lot of people do, I think that's why it's been so popular and so enduring over the years. And Fallen Order does a great job of transmitting that and recreating that. So you go out into the galaxy. There are going to be 4 main planets that you will go to. The minutiae of where you're going and why at any given time is kind of semi-interesting. It's like you have to go find a thing or do a thing. I found myself checking my phone a little bit during the cutscenes, to my shame. But the story does hang together. There are a few more MacGuffins than you might expect in Star Wars. I feel like in original Star Wars, you were very rarely looking for the secret crystal of whatever. You were more often going to find a person, or to find a lead, or to untangle a mystery, or to do something big, like to take down an Imperial ship, or have a climactic confrontation, that sort of thing. More MacGuffins in this game, a bit more video gamey as you might expect. But the worlds are very cool. They are semi-linear, maze-like levels with intertwining routes, Metroidvania elements. So you'll often see something like a scored wall that you cannot climb yet, and you know that you have to come back to it later. Lots of backtracking, lots of revisiting levels. You travel between the levels on a ship. It's called the Mantis. It's very cool. It has a giant fin that kind of sticks out to the side when it's flying, and then when it comes into land, it rotates so that it's pointing upwards and the ship comes into land. It's very, very cool. Very, very original Star Wars. And after Bogano, which is the small swampy planet with the temple and the really cool Jedi homestead, you will go to Zepho, which is an icy, labyrinthine, imperial outpost and mining operation full of lifts and downward journeys into caves and a wind-whipped surface. You will go to Kashyyyk, which is a really cool, verdant, swampy forest planet, a bit like Dagobah, where Wookiees are engaged in guerrilla warfare with the Empire. And you will go to Dathomir, which is a classic evil planet with red skies and jagged mountains that is home to a Force-sensitive cult. They are all really, really interesting. They're all beautiful to look at. And you travel between them in your ship, which acts as a hub. It has a lightsaber station where you can change your cosmetics. It has a meditation point where you can access the skill tree. You will collect seeds that you can plant into the plant area on the ship. And your friends are there, so you can talk to them as well. There is a cool little sequence in the cockpit where you choose the planet that you want to go to next. You come into the cockpit, you jump to light speed, and then you come out of orbit, out of light speed rather, in that classic Star Wars snap, and see a giant planet before you. You come in for landing, your ship lands, and then you step out, and out you go into the level. So it's really nicely woven together with the ship acting as a hub, and you have to leave the ship, explore, do whatever you've got to do, and then come back to the ship, take off again, choose your next planet, and you'll revisit those planets quite often, I think 2 or 3 times each. You can go to Dathomir straight away. I did that on my first playthrough, and I think it put me off the game a little because Dathomir is pretty hard. You power up as you go. So Dathomir was a mistake. I think, in a lot of games, the player will run left rather than right just to see what is there, or run backwards rather than forwards into the clearly lit and laid out path you're supposed to take. And a lot of times in games, you'll get a little reward for doing that. Your curiosity is often rewarded. Not the case in Fallen Order. I think don't bother experimenting. Just do what you're supposed to do in this game and you'll have a better time. And I think I should say here that the level design is a little patchy in this game. I think Bogano is perfect. It's a small, compact, concise level, full of secrets, full of little hidden things that you will find. I went back 3 or 4 times throughout my playthrough and I always found something new. I 100%ed Bogano. I absolutely loved the design of that level. It's so cool. There are loads of little furry creatures running around. You can scan stuff, you can find stuff, find secrets. Your abilities really open it up over time. Zepho, though, Zepho is a big problem in this game. It is such a labyrinth. And this is the real downside of this game. It's the main downside I have with it. There is no fast travel between the various save points that you will find. So if you get all the way to the heart of a complex maze, which Zepho is, with a vast subterranean underground that is very, very tangled, lots of one-way things where you have to slide down somewhere and you come out somewhere else, it renders the map useless. The complex level design renders the map useless. You cannot read the map because the level is too complicated. And when you get to where you're going, which takes a while, you literally have to walk back the way you came. The lack of fast travel means that you just have to go backwards through the level. Sometimes you will get shortcuts, but another problem with the game is that the visual signposting isn't always there. So it doesn't have those yellow paint splotches that we're so used to from like Horizon or, all of those games where ledges are painted because someone came before you and painted them all. It's very gamey and very silly, and I always criticize that when I see it in games. But this game doesn't have it, and the downside of having such lush, detailed, beautiful environments is that the thing that you're supposed to be looking at doesn't always read. There isn't always like a spotlight shining onto something. There isn't always a painted ledge. And so I found myself failing to see where I was supposed to go fairly often. And on the way back through a level that you've come through already, I found myself missing the shortcuts that I was supposed to take to get me back to the surface and doing endless loops in this maze, just completely lost. I really wish that you could fast travel back to the ship. I really wish that you could fast travel between save points. And I get why that's not done here. There is definitely a will for you to go and get a new ability and then to backtrack and use that ability to go back through the maze that you've just come through and to find secrets that you didn't find, to find alternate routes. But if you combine the overcomplicated level designs, especially on Zepho, and the poor visual signposting that doesn't lead you where you're supposed to go, you end up lost. And it's a big problem in the game, and it actually tanked my playthrough the first time that I came through the game. The map itself isn't bad. It's a 3D map that you can rotate and zoom in and zoom out, but when it's a 5 deep dungeon, the map is so 3D, and it's a hologram, so it's transparent blue, and you can see the other floors behind the floor that you're looking at. It's so visually cluttered, so hard to read, even though it does have green panels for places that you haven't been yet, yellow panels for available unexplored doors, and red panels for things that you cannot access yet. Even with that information in it, it's a big problem. I'm happy to say that in Survivor, they have tried to ameliorate that problem by putting additional data into the map. So I'm very curious that as I play through Survivor, whether or not that map is going to stand up against the complexity of the level design. I'm also curious to see if they've done anything in Survivor to help out with not being able to read the environment, just more use of light, more use of color, more use of subtle cues to push you in the right direction, because it is the nadir of Fallen Order, and it's a big mark against the game, I would say. there are lots of things to love about the game too. I would say that the traversal is one of the best ones. You unlock abilities as you progress through the game, because Cal's relationship has been damaged with the Force for reasons that we will find out, and at climactic moments in the game, you will have little flashback sequences where Cal will flash back to his Jedi training, and you will unlock new abilities, and these come pretty fast at the start. You get some wall running, like in Titanfall. You get slow motion, so you can slow down enemies, which is invaluable in combat, and you can slow down turbine blades to pass through them. You'll get a force push to push things away from you, force pull to pull down things, pull ropes towards you and swing. You will get a double jump, a Jedi flip it's called here, which makes traversal so much easier. I wish that it had come earlier in the game. And a few other abilities like modes of climbing, modes of swimming, things that really make you feel nimble and skillful and like a Jedi, and that's what this game does best, is that it makes you feel like a Jedi. So when you're chaining together abilities in this really amazing way, where you're wall running and then force pulling a rope towards you as you fall through a void, swinging on the rope, double jumping onto a climbable surface, leaping up that, surfing down a mud chute, double jumping over gaps, and then repeating that in different combinations to do these improbable acts of amazing Jedi acrobatics. It feels just fantastic. All of the animations are very much like Luke when he's in training with Yoda on Dagobah, like the flips that you do, the jumps that you do. All of the animation is just beautiful, and it feels amazing when it's working. It's really good. And I think the combat deserves a shout out too. It's really ambitious, I would say. It's pretty versatile. It really nails the Jedi feeling again. The Force powers are an integral part of combat. The animations, again, are brilliant. When Cal swings the lightsaber, the sound is great, and it's so graceful and balletic. Like, he'll do forehand and backhand slashes. He will spin the saber in his hand to rebound bullets. He will whip it around very quickly. And it makes you feel like a genius, which is just what you want from a Star Wars game, I think, to be doing these improbable, brilliant feats. You can use the Force, so you have to decide what to do when you come into a scenario, and very quickly you will realize if there is a trooper standing by a cliff, you can force push them off. If there are ranged troopers shooting down at you, you can bounce back their bullets and take them out with one hit, and then you can deal with the melee enemies. You can lock onto them with the R-stick and rotate around them in that cool way. Parrying is very key. Each enemy has a guard break limit, so if you parry a couple of hits, they will guard break and you can take them out using your more powerful attacks. You'll get rocket launcher troops, and you can use the force push to launch the rocket back against them for a big explosion. You get probe droids that make that really cool noise that probe droids make. You can suck it towards you, hit it, and then throw it away, and it will explode like a grenade. So the whole thing just feels wonderful. Really, really good combat. Very strategic, very versatile, and all of the powers end up being very useful in the combat. You will also get boss fights, which are pretty cool. They are fast, brutal duels, like lightsaber duels against Inquisitors and Purge troopers who are trying to wipe out the Jedi throughout the universe. You have to evade, you have to parry, you have to learn patterns. And it felt like you were clinging on for dear life, I think, in those battles, and you are in a way. Like, they will rarely end with an emphatic victory for Cal. They will often end with him escaping by the skin of his teeth. And as a young Padawan becoming a Jedi, it should feel that way, because you're fighting against much more powerful, developed opponents. So in those boss battles, I really felt like I was scrambling to keep pace. I was being knocked over a lot. I was evading and just choosing my moments to hit. There are also optional and surprising boss fights where you might be backtracking through and something might be there that wasn't before, like tougher versions of a fauna or megafauna that you fought before, or bounty hunters that are after Cal, that kind of thing. So it really does keep it varied, and I enjoyed the combat throughout this game. I will say that the combat really wrecked me the first time I played it 3 years ago, but I hadn't yet played a game at that time where parrying was key. And having played Elden Ring, I think 70 hours of Elden Ring really beats into you how important it is to block, how important it is to evade, to choose your moments to attack. And the first time I played this game, I approached it like an action-adventure, which was a mistake. It has a Souls-like element to it, not only in the campfires, which are meditation points in this game, they're your restart points, and you can choose to replenish your stims and replenish your health, but all of the enemies will respawn. So it has that Souls-like mechanic. It has shortcuts, so you will unlock shortcuts like ropes or doors that will let you through into previous areas. So if you have to pass through again, you can ostensibly do it faster, although the level design and the visual signposting means that you might well miss these or forget these, unfortunately. So it does have Souls-like mechanics in both design and in combat, with varying degrees of success. I would say the combat is pretty solid. I would say that the other stuff is a little less successful. But this playthrough, I played it on base difficulty, on normal, and I got through it just fine. There was one spike towards the end, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. I had like a little mini tantrum and then just wrecked that boss the next time. So I think it's manageable difficulty for anyone who has even sort of touched against a Souls game, I would say. There is also collectibles, there is XP and a skill tree. You get XP from winning in combat, but also by finding force echoes. You can sense areas where there is a blue glow, and you'll get a memory for your codex, you'll get some text and VO, and some XP, so they're worth seeking out, both for story and gameplay reasons. BD1 will also scan certain areas of scenery to give you world detail, for example, machinery or like a corpse or an empty residence or a statue. BD1 can scan it and give you contextual information that helps to fill out the world. One thing that I really liked is that when you are near one of these points, he will jump off your shoulder and beep and run away. And if you chase him, he will lead you to a scannable point, which I thought was a really nice touch. It's the kind of thing that might not necessarily stand out during a playthrough, but had a really positive impact on gameplay for me. It helped me not to miss stuff. So BD1 was a really, really good little companion in this game. You also find chests all over the place. These only contain cosmetics. You get poncho colors for your Jedi. You get BD1 and Mantis paint jobs. And you can customize your lightsaber handle in minute detail, maybe too much detail, because by the time that I'd got 30 different handles and pommels and hilts for my lightsaber, I was pretty done with opening chests, but my gamer brain would never let me walk past one anyway. I understand that in Survivor, Cal is much more customizable with different hair and different facial hair and different gloves and all of that different stuff. So it is a big part of the Star Wars universe, the visuality of it all. And so I think more customization will make for more engaged and rewarding exploration as you're finding all of that cool stuff in the sequel. And without wishing to give away any spoilers, I will say that the ending of the game is very, very cool. The story is fine. I was vaguely engaged with it, but mostly I was engaged with it just to see new places and to do more cool Jedi stuff. The story itself it's all right. It gets the job done. And if you combine it with the environments, the Jedi feeling combat, the traversal, the beautiful object and architecture and costume and enemy design, it was enough to get me through it. Like the vibe of Star Wars was enough to get me through what is, in honesty, a bit of a prosaic story about finding MacGuffins to save things from the thing. It's pretty standard stuff. But there are a couple of nice little character arcs in it. There are a couple of nice little quirks and side quests that you can do, I guess, along the way, and little surprises that come along. And all in all, it was a really satisfying Star Wars experience. So just to run through a couple of those good things and bad things. First and foremost, the Star Wars atmosphere, absolutely nailed here. There are screen wipes that look like the original cuts that were in the Star Wars film. There are light speed jumps where the stars turn into lines. It has that beautiful score. The architecture is amazing, really jaw-dropping at times. The vehicles have that really distinctive style, just peak sci-fi. Just brilliant. The nature is great. The swamps, the mountains, the wildlife, the weather effects, the megafauna that you will see along the way, and all of the sound of these environments that brings them to life, the buzzing insects and strange bird cries, and the buzzing of the lightsaber, and the sound in combat is just majestic and perfect. Sparks really fly in combat. I love that in combat, often you will come into a new area and you will see a fight underway, like a sort of a giant creature fighting against 5 stormtroopers, and you can choose whether you want to watch it unfold and let them get weaker, or whether you want to wade in and get all of the XP. So it made it feel like the world was alive in a really cool way. Felt like a bit of a masterstroke, actually. That happened again and again. It never felt like they were all just standing waiting for you. Usually there was something happening every time you walked into a new area. The combat moveset is versatile. The way it incorporates force powers is just amazing. Pulling and pushing and slowing down enemies, throwing back rockets, rebounding blast bolts, parrying and countering. It felt great, really, really cool. And overall, it's the feeling of being a Jedi in the Star Wars universe is nailed here. The traversal, the combat, using the Force to smash open an air vent that you can then crawl into, pulling a rope towards you to swing over a gap. It's just classic Star Wars beats constantly in this game. It's built into the traversal and combat. So sometimes you just get immense moments that play out through gameplay. The story and the music and the visual design are all brilliant. I think this is the best Star Wars game that I have played. I guess that some people will say something about Knights of the Old Republic, I think it's called, something like that. I've never played that one. I think I would have liked the remake that got cancelled, but for me, this is the best Star Wars game I've played. As for the downsides, there are some slippery traversal moments where the ledge catching doesn't quite work. It can get frustrating, floating against things when Cal should have caught it, falling into water again and again. The game seeming to dither when you jump against something, like it can't decide whether to land you or kill you, and it will often decide against you, sadly. So despite its brilliance, the traversal also has problems. That level design, Bogdano is honestly very, very good. Great sight lines to secrets, lots to discover. The Metroidvania elements read well and encourage repeat visits. Zepho is a disaster. It's overcomplicated. The levels render the map unreadable. The floors overlap each other, too many one-way systems. It's just a disaster. I never revisited it unless I had to for the story. But Kashyyyk was just a joy, actually. There's a part where you have to climb a giant tree, and it involves diving underwater, it involves bouncing over things. Just brilliant. But Zepho, if you play this game, bear in mind when you get to Zepho that you just have to push through, because some of the best moments in the game will reward you if you can get through it. No fast travel is a real kick in the lightsaber. It's unfortunate that you have to backtrack through the levels again and again and again. It feels terrible. It's too easy to get lost. I wish that I could just call an Uber. I wish I could just radio my ship and have them come pick me up. The environmental readability is a problem. I have a renewed love of yellow paint splotches now because this game really needed them. I would say that the story revolving around MacGuffins isn't quite in the spirit of Star Wars. Plot tokens isn't really what it's about. The story's tended to be about action and about grand goals rather than looking for a key to open a thing to get the globe. And there's a bit of that in this game. It's a bit video gamey. So those are the downsides. It's certainly a flawed game. I can see why it ended up on an 8 out of 10. I think that the developers might have expected more from the reviews, but those flaws really do, they are like 1,000 paper cuts on the gameplay experience. I think that me having played half of the game 3 years ago and then ditched it and then come back to it meant that I had banked all of that experience somewhere in the back of my mind. So I knew what I was getting myself into, and I was much more able to just brush past it. I was much more able to look for cues that were not apparent enough. It's like you have to train the eye to see things that don't immediately jump out to you. You have to be very keen-eyed, otherwise you're going to end up going in circles again and again. So I think this being my second playthrough really helped me to enjoy the game. But I really did enjoy it. At the end of this game, I felt like it was kind of immense in a way, actually. For all of its flaws and all of its problems, the feeling that it gave me and the journey that I went on, the things that I saw, were very, very memorable. I think you could put this game next to something like God of War 2018 in many ways. That game has more gravity to the story and more gravitas in the storytelling. But this game is pretty much as good in many, many ways, actually. So, big praise for Jedi Fallen Order. I would say that you can usually get this game pretty cheap now. I believe it is on EA Play and has been on Game Pass, might still be there. It was certainly enough to make me pick up Jedi Survivor. I have started my playthrough of that one. I'm really enjoying it, so you can expect me to talk about Jedi Survivor in another episode coming soon. But for now, that's one down. I really enjoyed my playthrough of Jedi Fallen Order. So that was quite a long review. I think I went long on that one and my energy is waning, so I'm going to keep it short at the end here. Hope you enjoyed the review. You can come and find me, tell me what you thought of Jedi Fallen Order. Did you enjoy the map? Could you read the map? Did you miss the paint splotches or not? You can find me on Twitter at Gaming in the Wild, also Instagram and elsewhere, Facebook, YouTube. You can also become a patron of this show if you would like to support the podcast, get bonus episodes, and join the Discord community. Do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. I will put a link in the show notes for that. I'll be back next week with another review. I've got a lot going on. I'm playing A Space for the Unbound. I'm nearly at the end game of that. And Zelda is bearing down on me now. So I'm going to try and play Minebo, A Walk Through Life as well. That's a nice short game. I'm going to try and power through a couple of indies alongside my playthrough of Survivor over the next week. Come back next week to hear me talk about maybe a bit more Survivor, maybe a few more indie games. And it will be the day of release of the new Zelda game next week. It's finally here. So thanks for listening, take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.